The gentle morning sunlight slipped through the torn blinds of Jacob Mercer's small Ohio apartment, casting warm golden streaks across the worn linoleum floor. It landed on a scene he never could have imagined in his wildest dreams. There, standing barefoot in his narrow kitchen, wearing nothing but his oversized gray cotton shirt that hung loosely on her frame, was Victoria Hale, the most powerful and formidable female CEO in Chicago's cutthroat tech world. Her long auburn hair tumbled freely over her shoulders in soft waves, framing a face that looked softer, more human, than the sharp, unapproachable executive who had once made seasoned executives tremble with a single raised eyebrow in boardrooms across the city. Jacob froze in the hallway, his heart hammering loudly in his chest, one hand still gripping the doorframe. He blinked hard, wondering if he was still lost in a dream he didn't deserve to have. The faint scent of fresh coffee and the distant hum of the old refrigerator grounded him in reality. Before we go any further, if you believe in the quiet power of kindness, the beauty of second chances, and the magic of unexpected human connections, please take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope today, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you stories like this. Stories like this remind us that life can change completely overnight, often when we least expect it. Jacob Mercer was not the kind of man the world usually favored. At 34 years old, he was a devoted single father doing his best to raise his bright-eyed 8-year-old son, Noah, in a humble 2-bedroom apartment situated above a long-closed hardware store in Columbus, Ohio. 3 years earlier, his beloved wife Lauren had been taken from them after a sudden and devastating illness, leaving Jacob drowning in overwhelming grief and mountains of medical bills that still haunted him. The world hadn't paused for his heartbreak. It kept spinning mercilessly. Jacob worked exhausting double shifts as a night maintenance supervisor at Hale Digital Systems, the very tech giant owned by the woman now standing in his kitchen. To him, Victoria had always seemed like a distant, untouchable figure, gliding through the gleaming headquarters in sleek black luxury cars, surrounded by a team of assistants and security, her confident heels echoing through marble lobbies like a warning to anyone who dared step out of line. He had only seen her up close once before, during a routine company safety inspection. She had shaken his hand firmly, looked him in the eyes, and thanked him sincerely for keeping the building running smoothly. Her gaze had been cool, professional, yet strangely observant, as though she saw beneath the surface of the people around her. The night everything changed had started like any ordinary shift. Jacob had stayed late to fix a burst pipe on one of the executive floors while a brutal winter storm raged outside. Snow and wind lashed violently against the tall windows, and the city had declared most roads nearly impassable. Around midnight, as he gathered his tools and prepared to head home, he noticed a lone figure standing in the dimly lit hallway. It was Victoria. Her car had broken down on the highway while she was returning from a high-profile charity gala. A driver had managed to get her back to the office, but the storm had stranded her there. Every hotel in the area was completely booked due to widespread power outages. With nowhere else to go, she stood there looking exhausted and vulnerable for the first time in his memory. Jacob didn't hesitate. He knew all too well what it felt like to have nowhere to turn. His apartment was small and modest, but it was warm and safe. Noah was spending the night at his grandparents' house, so there was room. Victoria had hesitated at first, her pride clearly warring with her fatigue, but exhaustion finally won out. And so, the wealthiest, most powerful woman in the company followed the quiet, unassuming maintenance supervisor out into the howling blizzard. Now, the next morning, seeing her in his shirt, Jacob felt strangely exposed. His home was humble and imperfect, mismatched secondhand furniture, colorful children's drawings taped to the refrigerator door, threadbare carpet in places, and that old coffee maker that always rattled and sputtered. But Victoria didn't seem uncomfortable at all. Instead, she looked peaceful, almost content, as she moved gently around the small space. The night before had been surprisingly easy and warm despite the initial awkwardness. They had sat together at his tiny kitchen table, sharing leftover spaghetti while the storm continued to howl outside. Stripped of her tailored designer suits and corporate armor, Victoria had seemed almost fragile. She asked him genuine questions about Noah, about how he balanced demanding work with single fatherhood. Jacob opened up, sharing tender stories of bedtime routines, chaotic science fair projects, and the time he tried learning to braid hair for a school play only to discover Noah simply needed help tying his sneakers. She listened with full attention, her usual sharp executive gaze softening into something warmer and more human. In return, Jacob learned that Victoria had grown up in a modest, struggling home in rural Pennsylvania, raised by a single mother who worked 3 exhausting jobs just to keep them afloat. Every scholarship she earned, every promotion she fought for, and every tough business decision she made had been fueled by a deep, lingering fear of slipping back into that instability. She had built a towering empire, but along the way, she had also built equally high emotional walls. Standing in his kitchen now, Victoria turned toward him with an expression he knew he would carry in his heart forever. There was no trace of arrogance or CEO authority, only raw vulnerability. She quietly told him that she hadn't slept that peacefully in years. Being in his simple home, hearing stories about Noah, and watching the gentle way Jacob folded his son's laundry the night before had reminded her of all the things she had sacrificed in her relentless pursuit of success. She admitted, her voice soft, that she had been chasing security so fiercely that she had forgotten what true security and peace actually felt like. Jacob stood speechless, not because she was powerful and wealthy, but because in that moment she was beautifully, relatably human. Over the next few weeks, something subtle yet profound began to shift between them. Victoria started visiting the Columbus branch far more frequently. She claimed it was to oversee renovations, but Jacob sensed it was more than that. She sought out his opinions on improving employee conditions and boosting morale. When he spoke passionately about the real struggles of hourly workers, juggling childcare, rising rent, and constant exhaustion, she listened intently and then took real action. Within months, the company introduced flexible scheduling and significantly expanded healthcare benefits. At home, Jacob found himself thinking about Victoria more than he ever expected. Waves of guilt would wash over him as he wondered if he was somehow betraying Lauren's memory. Grief had been his constant companion for so long. Yet alongside the sorrow, something new and hopeful was quietly stirring in his heart. Noah noticed the change first. One evening he looked up and asked innocently, "Dad, why do you smile at your phone so much now?" Victoria faced her own battles on the other side. Board members questioned her frequent trips to Ohio. Investors whispered that she was losing her legendary edge. For years she had thrived on being untouchable. Now she found herself willingly driving 3 hours each way just to attend Noah's school robotics competition, standing proudly beside Jacob in a noisy, crowded gymnasium filled with cheering families. The real test came when tabloids caught wind of the powerful CEO spending personal time with an ordinary maintenance supervisor. The headlines were harsh, painting Jacob as opportunistic. Cruel comments flooded online forums. Jacob seriously considered stepping back, convinced he was damaging her reputation and career. He had already endured enough loss in his life and believed he could survive another. But Victoria refused to retreat behind her old walls. For the first time in her career, she addressed the rumors head-on in a public statement. She spoke movingly about dignity, about how a person's true worth was measured by their heart and character, not their salary or title. She acknowledged Jacob not as an employee, but as the kind man who had shown her genuine compassion when she needed it most. Slowly, the backlash began turning into admiration and respect. One beautiful early spring evening, Jacob returned home from work to find Victoria sitting at his kitchen table with Noah, their heads bent together as they worked on building a small solar-powered car for his school project. The sound of their laughter filling the modest apartment felt almost surreal. Outside, the world still buzzed with stock prices and corporate strategies, but inside those walls, there was warmth, joy, and connection. In that moment, Jacob realized that real love hadn't arrived with dramatic fireworks or grand gestures. It had grown quietly and steadily, through shared simple meals, late-night conversations about fears and ambitions, and watching Victoria kneel patiently on the living room floor to help fix a broken toy. It had blossomed in the space where two tired, guarded adults chose honesty and vulnerability over pride. A year after that fateful snowstorm, Hale Digital Systems proudly announced the opening of a new community innovation center in Columbus. The center would provide free technology training to single parents and underprivileged youth. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Victoria stood beside Jacob and Noah not as a distant executive, but as part of a real family. She credited the entire idea to the powerful lessons she had learned in a small, humble apartment during one harsh winter storm. That success means nothing if it cannot be shared with others. Jacob looked out at the gathered crowd and reflected on the man he used to be, tired, grieving, and resigned to merely surviving rather than truly living. He hadn't set out to meet a CEO. He had simply opened his door on a cold, stormy night to help someone in need. And that one small act of kindness had quietly reshaped both of their worlds. That vivid morning memory, waking up to find Victoria standing there in his shirt, remained etched deeply in his heart. Not because of shock or romance alone, but because it symbolized something far deeper. The beautiful moment when two people decided to set aside their titles, their fears, and the walls they had built around their hearts. Noah later told his father with simple wisdom, "Storms are scary, Dad, but sometimes they clear the sky for something better." Jacob finally understood that even life's harshest, darkest nights can carry the most unexpected and beautiful gifts. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love can grow in the most unlikely places, and that a single act of kindness can rewrite destinies, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps stories like this alive and meaningful. In the end, Jacob didn't just wake up to a CEO wearing his shirt. He woke up to possibility, hope, and a new beginning. And sometimes, that is far more powerful than anything else.